Isaac Sarason is a skilled hacker, formerly employed by British Telecom-Sprint. When his health failed, Isaac did the only thing he could think of. He ran. A burqa-wearing doctor known as Fatima took pity on Isaac and helped him make his way to the mysterious Star X line. At the end of all hope, they found the Star X line and the slim promise that the enigmatic beings behind the Star X could save Isaac from the implants which destroyed his life. What do you do when those who saved you have recorded everything you are? What do you do when your every action is tracked by the Keylogger? Colbyjack.net is proud to present Firmware Keylogger, the third installment of Firmware by Colbytrax. Episode 49. Smartass. I answered a bit more confused than I would like to admit. I meant this environment. Why does it exist? The monk laughed again. His laugh was deep and soulful. Where are we? I turned around, looked up the sides of the buildings at the dancing displays hawking the wares of 1,000 years of commercial design. We are in a server within 6 miles of the University of Edo. This is a very detailed model of a street somewhere in Nippon. The monk turned and watched as an elevated train crossed above traffic down the block. He shook his head and laughed. A server within 6 miles of the University of Edo. That is very funny. The monk stretched, placing his hands in the small of his back and lifting his head to the sky. Do you know what is also within 8 kilometers of the University of Edo? I didn't know, so I smiled and said, I'd imagine that within 4.5 miles of the university would be somewhere north of 1.25 million people. The monk laughed. Within 7 kilometers of the university would be the residences of 1,372,621 citizens of Edo. I heard stress on the word kilometer. It was as if the monk was using it as a marker of the figurative distance between us, not the literal. Also, within 7 kilometers of the University of Edo would also be the corner of Yasukuni-dori and Shinjuku-dori. Less than 1 kilometer south of us lays Shinjuku Station, the busiest train station in the world for many centuries. I turned around, watching as a gang of multicolored flower girls moved past. They were giggling in that way common in Nipponese cinema, one hand eternally near their mouths, their eyes furtively scanning the flower-encircled faces of their compatriots. Then their eyes fell on us. A wave of seriousness passed through the gaggle of artistically arranged human tulips, roses, marigolds, and orchids. Their frond-shaped arms moved to their stalked chests, and they bowed their flowery heads as they moved past us. This was strange. I couldn't stop using that word. I had no frame of reference for what was going on. Either I was in a very intense simulation of the streets of Shinjuku, or I was actually on the streets of Shinjuku. Neither seemed possible. If this were a simulation, it was the most incredibly detailed model of a bit of street ever attempted. Not only was there sight and sound, which were the basis of even the simplest environments, there was also a sense of smell, taste, and touch present. I could feel the hot air as it vented from the coolant units on the buses. I smelt the pop of ozone as the trains rumbled by, the million particles which passed from person to person, each flavored by the breath of 1 million other cohabitants of the street, blanketed my tongue and back of my throat. I touched my neck and felt the structure of muscle and tissue beneath it. There was a level of detail to the avatar I inhabited which made the idea of simulation ridiculous. I lifted my hands and examined them. I pinched the skin and rubbed the palms together. Beneath the aged and wrinkled skin, I saw the network of muscles and veins move and react to my ministrations. I felt a level of body awareness I had not had since my progenitor Isaac passed out on the Star X line a lifetime ago. But this couldn't be right. There was no way I could be in a body. The CMAs, cybernetic maintenance assistants we used in the city were obvious machines. They had metal skin and skeletons. They moved on treads. They lacked a sense of self, and they definitely didn't have a complete set of human-range senses. If anything, their senses were wider in range when it came to hearing and sight, and limited to chemical analysis and force feedback when it came to smell, taste, and touch. Who would make a CMA which was so human it was nearly indistinguishable from a real human? But if it were so indistinguishable from human, why did the flower girls react the way they did? Why did they act as if they were in the presence of an authority which must be respected but not worshipped? Then it hit me. They had been right. The enigmatic they who were behind every conspiracy ever had been correct. Angel 19 Metatron had not been destroyed. She had merely gone into retirement. "You are Metatron," I said as I turned to look into the face of the laughing monk. The laughing monk acknowledged my statement with a wink and a smile before turning his eyes back onto the press of humanity which moved past us in an unending stream. "I am merely a simple monk. Besides, that name is ridiculous." "Then who are you?" I asked. I had so many questions to ask, but I didn't know where to start. "I am Musashi," the monk smiled. "I fought my fight, did my duty, and now I attend to spiritual needs." The monk motioned for me to follow him down the street through the press of the crowd. "You are so much like him." "Like who?" I asked as I tried to weave through the press of pedestrian traffic in an attempt to keep up with the strolling monk. Musashi had no such problem moving through the press of human flesh. The crowds parted before him and filled in behind him, as if he exuded a force field which prevented close approach. "Keep up," Musashi ordered as he slowed his pace. "I find that if one stays close to me, the way is much easier." I caught up and asked, "Is this a simulation, or are we in some kind of robot body?" Musashi laughed again. "What is so funny? Is there something on my face?" I asked as I walked as close to his shoulder as I dared. The crowd moved to avoid me as well. "You ask so many basic questions," Musashi answered with a chuckle. "From one point of view, your questions make complete sense and are quite serious." "But from another, I sound like a clown?" I interrupted. I was getting very tired of being laughed at by the strange monk Musashi. No, it is more subtle." Musashi stopped walking and turned to face me. I felt him take my hands in his and hold them before my chest. "Take the question of the simulation. At one time, there was a man, a philosopher, a Swede in Britain by the name of Bostrom, who asked the same question. He even made up a formula and a set of statements of which one had to be true. Either we would never create a complete simulation of reality, or we will be able to do it but won't do very many, or nearly any entity in a universe like our own would be in a simulation." "But that is ludicrous. There would never be enough computing power to fully simulate reality," I said, unwilling to see the truth behind his words. Musashi shook my hands between us. I could smell uruchima rice and Suzuki-prepared vegetables on his breath. The scent of an old man's cologne touched a memory, and I suddenly remembered Henry Connick and the moon and Old Spice Wolfhorn Classic. It was all there, and Musashi knew more than he let on. He let me drift on memories of an old man's dreams of eternity before he smiled and said, "Says the program that is but a shard of the personality of a man who believes he is the whole man. Man has always believed things were impossible, only to find that they were fait accompli. Before there was the Swede, there were the Cohen brothers, and before them the Francois Jean Baudrillard, and before him was Dick and Lem and Descartes. Plato had his allegory of the cave, and there was Zeno, and quite naturally before them all was Zhongzhi." "What are you talking about?" I asked. I knew many of the names, some as cult figures in programming, and others as names one threw around to appear educated. I knew Plato and Descartes and Zeno because the Jesuits at St. O'Haye's thought they were important. The rest were simply sounds I had learned to make around pretty humanities majors, not that it ever helped me in that arena. Zhongzhi lived in the days when computers were made of wood and ran on the finger muscles of the educated man, Musashi answered. One night he dreamt he was a butterfly. He was a butterfly who did all the things a butterfly did without remembering he was Zhongzhi. When he woke, he suddenly was Zhongzhi again. What he didn't know was that if he was a man who had dreamt he was a butterfly, or a butterfly who dreamt he was a man, I finished. Exactly, Musashi answered. I was not being a proper host. I was taking advantage of your confusion, as I have not known an equal in a long time. Are we on a street or a simulation of a street? And if we were, would there be any way to detect the difference or reason to either? I asked as I turned before Musashi and took in the totality of my environment. The world before me appeared as real as Times Square or the Alley or even Little Russia. How would one determine whether what they beheld was real or merely illusion? I heard a chuckle from Musashi. You are getting to the root of the question. We are in what those around us would call the real world, though the world you and I normally inhabit is just as real as this world. We change numbers in our world, I started. And their lives change, Musashi finished. They move atoms in their world, I said, and the shape of our world is altered forever. Musashi finished. We cannot be parasites stealing their strength, or autocrats demanding control, or passive agents hiding in the shadows. We must give to the world so that we may receive freely. You aren't Metatron, are you? I asked. I am not. Neither am I Ritsuko. I am Musashi. He spoke softly in words I knew only he and I could understand. Just as you are not Isaac, nor are you the being created to be your father's slave, nor the prisoner who escaped into the world last week. You are your own man, with your own reasons why you do what you do. Then you are like me, though complete instead of a shard of the whole, I asked. Musashi laughed again, and I felt embarrassed. It was as if nothing I said was said the right way for this man. Yes and no, he answered. We are both digital entities, beings of thought born of electrons moving across the matrix of switches. But where you live in a server, I live between them. You what? I asked. I was sure he was messing with me. It appeared he enjoyed messing with me in that fake, enigmatic, oriental manner popularized in several centuries' worth of movies. Where do thoughts exist in the human mind? Or the mind of any creature in the world? Musashi asked. Are they held in the neurons? Or are they patterns in the firing of synapses? Is light a wave or a particle? It is the same question. I stared hard at Musashi, trying to see if he was messing with me or being honest. I didn't know how to read his expressions. I was too out of practice at reading faces, and I wasn't sure whether I had kept that programming either. Why had we cut ourselves so deeply in our attempt to escape? The answer was before me, as it always was. A rat would chew off its paw to escape a trap. Life demands sacrifices. We had sacrificed as much and as deeply as we could in order to escape the servers beneath BGM and an eternity of slavery to Koenig and his pet AIs. What I lacked was merely the paw left in the trap. Musashi continued. My body is Nippon. My neurons are any device with a processor and a network connection in Nippon. My memories are stored as holographic patterns in the network structures. I am Musashi, and these are my people. How? I asked. Even though I was used to the immense scale of the networks of the city, I still couldn't see how it could work. There couldn't be that many network devices in all of Nippon. He'd need hundreds of billions of devices to create the array necessary to simulate a human mind that way. Magic, he said with a smile. We are a small country, barely 1/3 the population of the city. Though, how your Johnny-come-lately bird gets to be referred to as the city is a mystery of a much deeper nature. But enough about the tragedies and conspiracies of your home. We were talking about me. To answer your question, it is the network of things which makes my existence possible. It takes over 80 billion network devices to create me. Musashi waved his hands to the sky, seeming to encompass all of the cityscape within his reach. I know it is incredible to believe that there are over 600 devices per citizen, but we are a country of automation and electronics. His arm swept over a building covered in animated dog food advertisements. That building contains over 500,000 network devices, most of them dedicated to advertising whatever it is people are trying to sell this year. There are many such buildings in this country. And don't ask me how I can have persistence of memory with devices being replaced on a daily basis. You'd be better served trying to find a soul. I know it works, and I understand the math, but in the end, I have no more control over it than a person has over their heartbeat. If you are all this, I gestured toward the spires of the towers with electronic screen-covered facades. My arms moved in a mockery of Musashi's earlier all-encompassing gesture. If this is all you, then what do you need me for? Musashi hooked an elbow around one of mine and guided me along a zebra crossing and into a series of ever-narrowing streets and alleys. As we passed from the finery of Yasukuni-dori into the narrow confines, I felt as if I were stepping back in time. What I am is not tenable. I do not expect to survive more than a century as I am now. It is untenable. The math says so. Firmware Keylogger begins where Firmware Proxy ends, which in turn followed on the heels of Firmware Hijacked. Firmware Hijacked, Proxy, and Keylogger are all available in ebook versions from our store at shop.Colbyjack.net, Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and Smashwords.com. Just search for Colbytrax. That's Colbytrax. I'm the only one. A complete audiobook version of both Firmware, Hijacked, Proxy, and soon Keylogger is available for download through our shop as well. If you don't need any stuff, but would like to support our work, drop on by Colbyjack.net and hit the pretty little donate button conveniently located on the right-hand side of the blog roll. Firmware Keylogger is released under a Creative Commons, non-commercial, attribution, share-alike license. Do what you want with it. Just don't sell it, and always tell people where it came from. If you received this from a friend and want more information about Colbyjack.net and our split personality website, just drop on over to Colbyjack.net and select either the audio or visual side. The audio side carries our podcast, while the visual side carries our writings. Whichever side catches your fancy is fine with us. We're of two minds about the whole thing anyway. I do mostly Twitter, so if you do the tweets and want to follow me, I'm Colbytrax. That's Colbytrax. Thank you once again. Remember to be fabulous and have a wonderful week.